So hello everyone and welcome to our first ISG Smart Talks podcast for 2020 for a new decade. And remember, our podcast is where we discuss technology and business and how both are being transformed by digital technologies. Our objectives for the podcast are pretty simple. We want to inform our listeners, we want to inspire if we can, and of course we want to entertain. So hopefully we achieved that in our previous episodes during 2019. And I have absolutely no doubt we will entertain you again today. So our 2020 season is going to be all about digital leaders and how to be a leader in a digital world. So I'll be interviewing business leaders and discussing what it takes to be a leader of a digital business and whether the role of leadership is being impacted by digital technology. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Dan Hushon, who's Senior Vice President and CTO of DXC Technologies. Dan and I will discuss the changing role of leadership in digital organizations. I'd also like to ask Dan to talk us through a report that he and DXC have just generated on 5 key technology themes which will transform the way we work in the future, at least 2 of which reference the role of leadership in the world of digital. So I want to get into that in some detail. But first, Dan, rather than me trying to introduce you, can I ask you to explain who you are to our listeners and also maybe just introduce DXC, because unlikely, I know, but there may be some people out there who haven't heard of DXC Technologies either. So.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Barry, and thank you, listeners. So my name is Dan Hushon, and I have been a chief technology officer of some way, shape, or form, or a technologist for almost 30 years now. My lineage came from, deep background in bioinformatics in college, right, all the way up to really helping to build one of the first public clouds, which was called SunGrid, $1 per CPU hour, to really beginning a space race at EMC by trying to drive big data platforms. And now really getting back to the business in terms of how can technology transform the business at DXC Technologies. And DXC is a Fortune 120 company. Our role is really one of the largest independent service integrators in the world. We have many marquee names, but, fundamentally, if you look at what we are regenerating ourselves to become, is the company that can both help you to get to silent running with your operations. So operate your business, you can then have the confidence to change the business and really take on digital.
Excellent. Good. And DXC is sort of changed in a way, or it's been in different forms to become the sort of digital firm that it is today. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of DXC from where it was to where it is now?
So probably if you really took it back a ways, right, the 2 founding core elements of DXC were a company called Computer Sciences Corporation and another one being EDS, together, right, represent roughly, 120 years of market experience, although it occurred in parallel, right, from launching the Apollo 11 space mission to other very high profile elements, both computer engineering, into the craze of outsourcing in the 90s. And now I think coming back out of that craze of outsourcing to how do we put information to work, which I think is our modern term for digital, and how do we help companies both operate their businesses with increased automation and intelligence, but also now change the business to take advantage of that intelligence to create growth and market opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you. And DXC is obviously a very large global full services business, so lots of technology support and consulting and what we used to call outsourcing, but we don't really call outsourcing anymore, but also in going into the business services world as well, right? So there's a split between what you do.
It's huge.
Use technology, to change business. Yeah, tell us about that. Sorry.
Yeah, so we have a lot of vertical industry experience as well. We're probably the 7th largest insurer in the world by policies under management, even though we're not an insurance company. So we do a huge amount of work. We have a large number of policy issuance and policy management systems that operate in just about every geography in the globe. Very large marquee set of clients, and we work on behalf of those clients to actually help them to manage those policies over time. We have some core banking systems that we own the software and operate. An old platform called Hogan, which is now being remanufactured to be a modern digital banking platform. We have trading software in the form of a market exchange mediation software, Fixnetics. We also have an EHR system, which is really one of the most modern EHR systems in the world, called Lorenzo, which operates more than a third of the lives in the UK, as well as others within Europe and Australia. So, we have a lot of industry experience, right, and then mixed in with a strong amount of technology experience. We operate in about 127 countries. We have over 100,000 employees, right? 80% of those are substantially technical, which I think, this is a hard grade, right? It's like, how technical are you? It doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is putting information to work for our clients. It's really an exciting time to be in this marketplace, because I see that the role of the CIO and the CTO and the CDO are substantially changing in the world's largest companies. And I also see that the impacts of clouds and new forms of acquiring software as a service and utilities is changing the way that the business interacts. And I think all of this confluence is creating a huge opportunity for everyone, right, for technology companies and business staff alike to partner up to create an outsized impact.
Yeah, excellent. And I just want to ask you, I'll ask you one more question on DXC, and then I'd really like to explore your role as CTO and the changing role of the CXO, let's call them for now. But when I think of, the older days, you mentioned, CSC or HP or IBM or whatever, in the old world, when I first got into this space, maybe 20 years ago, when I thought of large technology services companies, I thought, data centers, or I thought systems integrators, or I thought applications. Whereas if we fast forward to where we are now, your business and others like yours are really digital transformation enablers, right? You spend a fortune on innovation, and your thought leaders with your innovation labs, your user experience experts, and you're really business consultants who understand how to best use technology to transform your clients' businesses. So it's been quite a journey over the last few years. Do you firstly, I suppose, do you recognize that description? Have I given an accurate description of your business?
It is, right? So I hate kind of the term digital transformation, because I feel like it's the next cloud washing, right? And so it means something to everyone, and therefore really means nothing. What I'm really seeing is that there is a IT modernization requirement. You need modern IT, right? A lot of CIOs, right, have not maintained the systems the way that they needed to, have not paced other technology investments, have not always turned off the things they should turn off, or invested like they should in the things that they should do more with. And as such, IT really is not, in most environments, is not as modernized as it needs to be more autonomously operated with higher reliability and availability, the right version, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, there's a requirement from the business around business transformation. And I think the modern firm actually has to do both, has to modernize IT so that IT can then intersect the business in the right way, so the business can begin to self-serve as it begins to transform itself to become that information-driven business. And so the way I really think about DXC and that business and technology component is, look, you need someone to help you to modernize your IT environment so you can then actually both transform but also potentially disrupt your business or your business segment, your industry, using the information that you as a large enterprise client, as a large enterprise has, that is one of your best and most valuable both weapons as well as defensive shields.
The role of a leader in businesses which are being transformed by these technologies in those ways you just described, as technology moves from being something which was an internal function which supported a business function to being, a revenue generation engine in its own right, and organizations struggle to work out how best to do that. It's complex, and it requires effective leadership. And the leadership that maybe we had in I don't want to use the word legacy, but more traditional businesses where we had a CIO, which at a very high level represented the sort of technology to the business at board level. And then quite often you then have a CTO that worked for the CIO, and the CTO would be the real technology expert who could support the CIO to achieve their objectives. To my mind, that model it works in some businesses, but it doesn't work in all now. And you have chief digital officers who are responsible, therefore, for the digital investment that are transforming businesses, working alongside CTOs, working alongside CIOs, working alongside CSOs. It's become quite complicated. What's your view of the best sort of structure for the technology leadership at that boardroom level now? Is there a blueprint?
I don't know if there's a fantastic blueprint. We tend to use the term double deep quite a bit. It's right. Recognizing that, people need to not be I-shaped or T-shaped, but actually X-shaped. And they need to have both a business background as well as a technology background, right? Coming up through the technology ranks, right, I had to build my business skills because that wasn't something that I innately, right, acquired in the things that excited me the most every day, which was what's the new technology and how can I use it or leverage it, right? I had to learn those business skills so that I could actually generate a return on investment forecast or a return on invested capital plan, right, or actually understand and begin to project, right, the forward net present value of an investment for capitalization. And these are just, silly things that I had to learn, right, that other people say, well, that's what I do for a living, right, and I got to learn the technology side. So I think it's those double deep people that are interesting. What we are seeing is that, we are moving from, I think, leadership as a tops down, we go this way, right, to I think much more of a shared leadership motion. I think as we begin to see that, the singularity of a leader versus a team-oriented leader, right, is pervading both startups, open source projects, community source, inner source projects, and enterprises alike. And it's this notion of a leadership team and creating a balanced and cooperative leadership team with the right people, with product ownership of the right products in the company that are really beginning to dictate success. You look at modern companies and they are really arranging themselves functionally around a common information base where they've moved the information into the center of the company rather than the executive team. And they're letting the information tell the story that business owners then take the objective, right, of taking advantage of.
Yeah. And I get that from a vision perspective, but do you think organizations are there yet? Maybe some of the most progressive are. I still see more traditional technology leadership structures in place across many of the clients I work with.
I see a lot of them, and a lot of them are under challenge, right? We've got some large CPGs, right, that are going to mass personalized goods. And so the old structure, right, of a pyramid, which is incredibly stable, right, actually breaks under the need to be much more agile and collaborative. Right. I mean, you think just about the structure of the organization. Right. And you think, I mean, Simon Sinek wrote about this around innovation cultures. Right. It's like it's hard to expect a pyramid to be innovative. Right. They're the most stable structure in the world. They're entirely designed to bear the weight. Right. And yet what we're looking for is low friction, right, highly agile, and, high complement. And as you begin to think about that, you begin to think differently. And so I do think that there's a balance point between traditional organizational silos and organizational structures and strategies and these modern, really collaborative, team-oriented, squad-oriented motions made popular by Netflix and others. But I think the proving ground is really unknown. I think the really interesting thing is recognizing that in order to get to pace, you need to put empowered individuals, right, into a room together with a shared expectation of a story or an epic or a story that leads them in the right direction with really a willingness to allow them to take the path that is proving to be that every 2 weeks is proving to be the most valuable. And that's a hard thing for a leader to do, not to be able to sit here and say, when's it going to be done? Well, it might never be done, but it's going to have more value every single time you come and see me. So even the questions that a leader asks are starting to change.
Yeah, and there's an inherent challenge in trying to maintain your current technology estate and business while trying to reinvent yourself around digital. And so many clients are going through that. And so you want to try to balance offering your people the flexibility and the tools and the space to think and use technology in the right ways, but only in a secure way, in an efficient way, in a centrally managed in many cases way. And so I see technology leaders having to battle with both of those demands. You want to be flexible, but you've got to be secure. And at the same time, your chief executive, your COO wants you to manage things incredibly tightly and to reduce and to control costs at all times. So it's a pretty complex leadership position or number of positions to have, or it's a very difficult challenge, right? To solve.
There are some difficult balance points, but at the same time, it's recognizing that the old world in which I literally had IT carved up into towers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like. If you go into a modern startup, right, they don't talk about, oh yeah, he's the networking guy. It's like this. No, it's about a shared team responsibility, right? So this is the product team, right, for X, right, and they're responsible for every facet of it, right? Securing the cloud compute, connecting the networks, right? Managing the data, securing the data, underwriting it through legal, blah blah blah, right? They've got it all, right? And so this full stack team, right, becomes really interesting. As you look at IT, even simple efficiencies like, hey, I don't need quite as much networking, but I need a bit more memory, right? It could be, those things don't cascade, right? The context is important. And so it's about taking and saying, hey, look, here is your guild. This is where you build your primary capability. And then here is your squad, your tribe. And this is the product family that you're going to go and join, and recognizing that I'm in that role, right, of bringing a capability, right, to a squad, but also learning from the other capabilities in the squad, so I become more rounded and more full stack over time. And that's true in leadership too, right? I mean, I didn't learn the business skills by going to business school. I learned them because I participated in squads and teams in which my leader took a little bit of extra time, right, to teach me about the new terms and why it was there. Or I just watched what they were doing and learned what they were doing and interpreted it. And that's the piece that I don't think we all recognize, is how valuable the cross-fertilization is, right, in the modern collaborative styles.
Well, that's interesting, and leads me on to wanting to talk about the study you published recently and the 5 themes that you found or you predicted. But before I go into those 5, maybe you could just describe that. Yeah. That study. Is that something you did at the end of the year, or has it been done in the last couple of weeks, the beginning of January? Or is it a 2020 predictions? What's the background?
So the 2020 trends, we start in about September of every year with the goal of trying to hit the end of November. Right. And the reason is that, November seems to be the corporate strategy session setting times in which people begin to take a little bit of time to themselves to think about, what am I going to do next year? And so we want to begin to put, DXC's view, right, out into the marketplace. This year was very unique for DXC. I really was looking at what I had been, my process is kind of, I squirrel away ideas throughout the year that I come back to. And I went back to my ideas, right, throughout the year, and I really recognized that just about everything I wanted to say, just about every technology is enterprises. I really believe that we have a very unique point in time right now in which enterprises substantially have the technology that they need to be wildly successful. For probably one of the first times. Yeah. Right. The AI technology has matured, and sure, we'd like to see more transparency, but man, I can get it from 3 different cloud vendors. Like I've got my diversity in my landscape. I've got the tools that I need. The technology standards have matured. I got lots of service providers, right? People are clamoring about the edge, which is finally the ability to bring compute to the data, which is what we should have been doing 20 years ago. All those things kind of happen. And if you look to the horizon, the only probably 2 or 3 really disruptive things we have, right? I mean, quantum's going to be very disruptive, both to cybersecurity, but also to architecture. Right. You've got some intermediate technologies that may or may not be disruptive. It really depends on how fast they can make it into market. Things like 5G, right? Yep. Don't know how disruptive that's going to be, how quickly. But I really looked at it and said, like, I can do almost everything on LTE that an enterprise needs to compete. So really what this year turned into was, hey, first off, there's some applied technology stuff that's interesting. So let's talk about it. But moreover, why are companies not able to take this huge treasure of technology that they now have access to and not compete more effectively with it? Yeah. And that's really what grounded our trends this year.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. That's a great intro. So the first one was all around AI redefining professional services. So can you let's take them one by one. You can sort of give me a brief synopsis on each one of the main points. Tell us what's behind that one.
I think that the last round of technology disruption really disrupted what I'll call less skilled labor, right? So whether we want to talk about the very beginnings of it with respect to automation in manufacturing, really up to kind of last year with ride-sharing program, the last 5 years, ride-sharing programs, digital news, digital shopping, right? Brick and mortar giving way, right? We've seen a lot of disruption in what I'll call in the economies and the job markets, right, of those less skilled. But we really didn't see the disruption of the knowledge-based professions. What I am really seeing right now in wealth management, in legal and paralegal services, in medical services, even in IT operations, is that computers, because they can optimize and simulate across far more dimensions than people can, if given the right information, can actually guide junior people, right, to better outcomes faster. Senior people to advisory services that allows them to use their time more judiciously on the unproven rather than the retread. And so as a result, there are a whole bunch of professions that are really on the cusp of having computers be able to take over what I'll call the 3 to 7 year professionals. And that's really hard because now we begin to think about what our talent pipeline really looks like in those knowledge-based worlds.
Yep. And I totally recognize that even in what we're discussing in ISG, how we can use technology ourselves, and whether it's predictive analytics or whether it's accessing all of the data that we have through our platforms to support our consultants when they're out in the field. So they're being augmented by technology, and the advice and the analysis that we give to our clients is being improved by this immediate access to terabytes of data that we've got on the market. And so I think it's just an example of how data is able to support professional services in the way you describe. So makes perfect sense.
And it's a really fine line, right, between augment, right, and replace, right? And that's the dimension, right, that we're all going to struggle through. Even the conversations you have about pilots, right, and whether or not you feel more comfortable with an AI or a pilot. So all of these are interesting, but they're all going to come to roost over the next couple of years. But when AI can read a contract 93% of the time better than a 5-year attorney, man, we're right there. Or would you rather bet on a computer to optimize your stock portfolio than a wealth manager, right? We are in those days where these are becoming options for us.
Yep. I totally agree, and that will it'll, with exponential growth and the technology improving ever more quickly. Literally, I'm sure you look at your social media, and I look at the trends and the things that I follow around AI and machine learning. I think every day I'm learning new things, and you think what we're seeing now, just imagine when we're in 2030 as opposed to 2020. So it's evolving fast. Okay, let's talk about the second one. So design thinking, which shifts from IT services for people to IT services for machines. And I think this is interesting, right? Designing for machine to machine rather than people working with machines, which I think is more or less at a high level what you're getting at here.
It is, right? So you begin to think about this, right? The tolerable latency for a person, right, is somewhere right around a second, right, to 10 seconds, right? How long are you willing to wait for a web page to load before you hit next, right? To be honest with you, and what we recognize is that if you make a machine wait a second, so first off, it doesn't have a personality, so it doesn't know to click next. But the second thing is that a machine without information, a computer without information supplied to it, right, is like a space heater. And so, machines never get tired, right? They have an infinite, supply today of cores, right, to process information, right? They are hungry for information all the time. The best machine is one that's kept busy. And so all of a sudden you begin to think very differently about what does it mean to continuously supply the machine with both foreground high priority work, but also background low priority work in a way that keeps it absolutely busy. And recognizing again that, sometimes the information that you best want that machine to process is not where the machine is today. forces you to think differently about optimizing the compute for the data rather than the data for the compute.
Right, interesting. Yeah, and as you get the machines doing the right things in the right places and putting more and more data into them as you optimize that model, that loop, then the machines improve even further, right? Or they will if they are an intelligent machine.
They keep going, right? The algorithms keep building themselves faster. We get to true local economies. We haven't talked about that very much, but this is that hyper local really matters. And so what happens when we begin to really think about the edge that we keep hearing? We hear people talk about the cloud fog and the cloud edge, right? What happens when you really begin to think of that pop very, very differently? Right? Is it around the smart highways? Is it about the smart cities? Is it about the smart parking garages? Is it around the smart shopping malls? We're going to start to see these hyperlocal marketplaces open up where the machines begin to use local processing and true machine-to-machine interaction to offer us the best possible coupon, right? Help me to complete my order, et cetera, making people's lives even better. So it's really exciting, but it's going to result in some of this hyperlocal behaviors as well.
Absolutely. Interesting. Okay, so the third one is something that very dear to my heart, because I feel as in the role that we have as an ISG, we're right in the middle of the technology ecosystem. But the third one is the value of data and how it increases within an ecosystem.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I started having some of the first discussions with accountants this year about whether or not our data can be capitalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that tells me that we're really on the cusp of something interesting. So, right, we've been collecting data sets. That data sets are reflecting a huge amount of time and work, right, collecting all kinds of information. Now, all of a sudden, we're beginning to suggest that data actually has value not just to us, but to others in the ecosystem, and that whether it's trading for dollars or trading for access to other data that actually makes it more complete or even more valuable, we're beginning to have discussions about data value decay times, right? How long does it take for my data to decay in value to the point at which it's not valuable anymore?
Yeah.
Right. And some decisions like, finding a parking space, right, that data decays incredibly quickly.
Absolutely.
In others, such as your longitudinal health record for population-based health and condition management, it may be lifetimes.
Yeah.
And so we're beginning to see a new vocabulary begin to open up, and that's telling me that we're on the cusp of really being able to create these substantially more integrated data exchanges where we are seeing all four qualities of a marketplace emerge, right? There needs to be instrumentation, i.e. you need to know what to call it, right? You need to have fluidity in the market. You need to have enough buyers and sellers to make sure that it doesn't stagnate. There has to be a value, a price, and there needs to be a bookmaker. Those will be important as we begin to really think about these ecosystems that are becoming marketplaces.
No, it's funny. There's a friend of mine who has set up a data exchange marketplace, and exactly as you've discussed, targeting data in one organization which is maybe of little value to their internal operations, but is of huge value to somebody else in a different industry, or vice versa. Yep. So putting them in a standard format, putting them in an exchange-based marketplace, and then commoditizing them and putting value on the data that comes out of your exhaust, if you like. Really interesting. Capitalizing data is a fascinating subject.
And you begin to think about things like wet chemistry and proteomics, protein folding, and you begin to recognize that a lot of drug companies are now saying, hey, right, we've all sampled all kinds of different molecules, or all kinds of different systems, or all kinds of different chemicals, or all kinds of different X, Y, and Z, right? But it wasn't what I was looking for. But it may be what you're looking for.
Exactly.
And so how do we begin to have a discussion about me allowing my wet chemistry or my wet biology, right, to make that accessible to you, increasing the corpus over which we both reason, because we're looking for different diseases, and we may have things that help each other. Right? It's really interesting dynamics going on.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. We'll have an eBay for data. But anyway, let's move on to your penultimate one. Number 4 was teams rather than superstars are the high performers, which I think we sort of touched on a little bit, and I think makes inherent common sense to me. But just explain a little bit about what's behind that one.
It is, but I have to tell you, like most of our reward systems, right, are really made up around rewarding the superstars, right? You hear about, the rating systems that rate individuals, right, on their individual performance. You hear, about 10x engineers. Oh, I need to hire a 10x engineer. You begin to, so like, I agree with you, right? It like makes sense and we all want to believe it. But on the flip side of it, much like you wanted to talk about organizational structure, most of our HR systems are designed to reward individuals, not teams.
Yeah.
And so we have some work to do. But what we are seeing, right, is that like it's way easier for me to build a high performance diamond than it is to a team of a T-level, a T-shaped team, right, of high top level, or even a pyramid. And what this begins to do is allows us to take and put, a 3x product owner and chief engineer into a team that then support and turn a bunch of 1 to 1.5x, right, journey people, right, into masters or into gurus, and then support a couple of negative ones who are the fresh outs, right, who are coming in and learning from everybody on the team about how to be a team member, but also about the technology and basis, so that I can move from apprentice right to journey person. I use that guild thing a lot because it really does help us to think about like, what skills do you need in order to mature in your career? How do you round those skills so you can actually talk about the different guilds in which you need membership in order to complete? And then as you move into a team, right, how do you actually talk about the team not around positions but around roles? And as you move into those roles, you begin to talk about the seniority or the merit of those roles, right? We like the dojo metaphors, right, where you've got white belts and yellow belts and green belts, which each talk about, right, what you've learned as well as what you can teach. And that metaphor is important as well. And so what we're really recognizing is it's far easier to build a 20x team than it is to find 2 10x engineers.
Yes, that makes sense, and again leads into your final point that some of those team members who are being supported by this new way of working become the leaders of the future. And your fifth point says a new wave of business leaders are accelerating business transformation, which is at the heart of what we've been talking about. But what was the thinking behind that one?
So we're seeing a bunch of much more entrepreneurial cultures begin to come out in the modern business structures and capabilities, right? We have a group called the Leading Edge Forum, which does a lot of work with industry leading organizations. We run study tours and we have lots of discussions with their executives to truly keep a pulse on what's going on. And what we're beginning to see is that as you begin to pick up the new vernacular of product owners and chief engineers, and the notion of tribes, you actually begin to move into a culture in which you begin to think about the new stuff really comes through new products and services that enter into the marketplace. Those products and services probably don't have traditional leaders, although they might be mentored by traditional leaders so that they can fit in and actually settle themselves into modern companies. But that they fundamentally become led in a new style under that product owner and product engineer style, where they're constantly sensing the marketplace and making rapid adjustments to their backlog, which then allows them to produce the kinds of products with the agility that they're looking for. I've seen a couple of companies that have actually moved from an old headquarters into a new agile way of working, a new agile workspace to begin to influence that culture. But when that workspace was actually built with a different style of architecture around design and collaboration, that many of the legacy leaders fell back. Then what started to happen was a coup d'etat, right? Whereas the new product owners had so much value in their business that they actually mutinied against the old products. This was an insurance company. It was very interesting to watch. But we've seen banks do this as well. And Gene Kim and Jez Humble and team in Phoenix Project and subsequent books, including Accelerate, begin to talk about how are companies actually beginning to accelerate this leadership culture? How are these product owners actually taking on new roles in the companies and expanding their scope and scale by building other product owners that work similarly so you're actually kind of eating the business from the inside. So like we're seeing a lot of work in this space. There is no company to follow right now who's perfect. I think a lot of people are experimenting. But what we are seeing is some of the most successful companies are demonstrating that the internal entrepreneurial, the inner sourcing of capability, the rewarding of teams, right, is actually generating a very different culture and a different agility, which according to Gene and his research in terms of looking at DevOps and continuous integration and the broader SRE style, allows you to outcompete your peers by about 3x in total stock market return. So we're seeing that the benefit is there for the companies who are even experimenting. Let's just say they're not 100%. They're just 30%. They're actually seeing the acceleration in the marketplace. You look at how fast Walmart Labs broke out and began to disrupt Walmart. There are lots of really interesting examples of companies who have led from the inside differently.
Yeah. And I mean, fascinating how a lot of those concepts which started with ways of developing software, right? Moving to agile, setting up pods and pizza-sized teams and super pods, and we've taken those concepts and constructs and put them into the business environment, and that's where a lot of them have started. But
is that really rare? I mean, you talk about a digital business, and what's a digital business to you, Barry?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you said at the very outset. There's no such thing as a digital business. It's just that businesses using technology in a different way, which irrelevant to the consumers who are trying to consume that technology, right? So
it is fun. I mean, like there are military analogies too, right? Yeah. You look at the difference between police and regular army and special forces, right? What Simon Wardley talks about is pioneers, settlers, and city planners, and apply that into businesses, right? That has a context, right? How do you allow for the pioneers, the Lewis and Clark, to fail and fail fast, recognizing that they're probably not the ones who are able to take that initial product ownership, right, to scale within your environment. And then once you're at scale, recognizing that you've settled now the technology at scale, but now you need city planners to come in and actually begin to harness the last efficiencies out of the motion that you've built. Right, so these different personalities, right, are actually becoming even more important in these new strategies.
Fascinating.
It is interesting.
It really is. Yeah, no, I could talk to you about this all day. However, I know you're on a time constraint, and so am I, and probably so are our listeners. So let me move to the questions I'd like to end the podcast with. As you know, I ask my guests 5 sort of standardish questions, and then we review them at the end of the year. So let me start with the first one, which would make sense. Is there a technology that's had a really big influence on your career to date, and if so, which one, or are there a number, and why?
So for me, I can't point to one, right? I've been on a string of pearls, right? So I call it constraint-based engineering, or you could think of it as the weak link, right? So, how do you do something and then find out where the gap is? So first thing was I started building embedded systems, tried to put them on the internet, and then recognized that actually I was using the wrong programming language for the internet. So that took me to Java. So first It was computing, then it was the internet, and then it was Java, and then Java actually taught me that people didn't understand information, so then it was big data, information technology and information streaming right into big data, and then, from big data into AI, which is how do I make sense of all of this? So, for me, it's been this string of pearls where, each of these technology advancements that we've seen come up, whether it be cloud or others, right, has actually just changed the constraint. And then that constraint becomes interesting for some period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how each one of them as a stepping stone, if you like, sort of has an impact on your career, and you follow that one, and then that leads to the next one, and to the next one. Makes perfect sense, especially for someone with your career and who is a CTO. that of course makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I'm a geek.
Nothing wrong with that. Is there a technology that, in your experience, promised something that you're really excited about and then really sort of failed to deliver, or has failed to deliver on its expectations so far? Has been something of a damp squib? I
think that I've seen a lot of things in which I got too excited too early.
Yeah.
And so, it depends, a lot of stuff you sit here and say, well, I can point to the roots of Java 2 Enterprise Edition in the mainframe architecture. right? Was Java Enterprise Edition too early, and did it suck, or was it just not there yet? We could talk about SOA, right? Corbo was just think of it as the machinations of a mad scientist that now on the internet with APIs and microservices and serverless, right, is the lingua franca of the information ecosystem we're about to talk about. So, when I started doing big data, it was just too early, right? People just couldn't get excited. They didn't understand the value of data, the value of data together, right? The need to bring computing to data. It was just after algorithmic processing on Wall Street, and we had just moved to algorithmic everything. And we were in our heyday, but we didn't have nearly enough people doing the information work, and it was just too early. But now that the clouds have emerged as the aggregation point for information, now we go, aha, this is so easy. And now that it's easy, it's accessible. Now that it's accessible, everyone has access to it. And now I can put machine learning and AI on it and get far more than I ever used to. So, I think there are lots of things in which are overhyped in the beginning, but I think it's really interesting when they cross through the chasm of disillusionment and back up into the value cycle, right? How valuable they are.
Into the plateau of productivity, I think it is. Yeah. No, really, really interesting. Okay. Third question, a bit more of I suppose, a personal one. Is there a gadget that you gain most pleasure or benefit from? And I'll tell you, I am a gadget. I'm a gadget obsessed. I'm taking notes as we speak on my new Remarkable tablet, which I think is just truly remarkable, very well named. And I got a Peloton just before Christmas, and I'm now obsessed with my Peloton because it fuses
right?
Some of my interests of keeping fit and cycling with digital technology. I think the way they've fused that interface together is just amazing. But yeah, is there anything that you use on a daily basis that I was going to say is life-changing? Maybe not life-changing, but useful.
I am so excited in how the tablets have matured. Right. I am an iPad person. I actually have just a old iPad, right, with a Zag hard keyboard on it, which means I can type with it sitting on my lap, which is nearly impossible on all the soft ones. And it is life-changing for me because I can take notes at 80 words a minute. I can, and have them online all the time. I can switch between applications seamlessly. The memory management doesn't crop up. I don't have to worry about security. It's just so easy to interact with everything I need to interact with. It just saves me time and creates productivity. So I'm in love with that tool. And you add that with that some of the collaboration tools, both Teams and Slack, and I'm a happy guy.
Excellent. Well, if you've not come across a Remarkable and you like your tablets, it's quite lo-fi, but it's basically a digital pad. You write on it, handwrite. It feels like paper, and it's pretty incredible. I think it was a Kickstarter funded thing. It's relatively new. This event I just been to in Miami, 4 of us had them, and we were all just raving about them. We took all of our notes using our normal handwriting on them as if we were using paper. So I'm not missing.
Those are awesome. Except that I type 80 words a minute, so
exactly. Okay. So my penultimate question, and I'm sure the answer to this will be manifold, but is there a single technology that you think our listeners should really keep an eye on that'll be game changing to business over the next decade, or is it a myriad of different technologies all converging together and being orchestrated?
Whether we want to call it, open AI or cognitive, machines are going to be able to reason over more information than people can, and in short order, right? People can see about 10 dimensions for optimization, right? Computers can see thousands. Right? It is not long, right, before we've equipped with the right information, right? Computers are able to help us make better and better decisions. It is going to have a massive prosperity impact on the whole globe. It's going to allow us to plant the right crops in the right places. It's going to allow us to deliver medical care right to everyone in the world at a lower cost. It's going to have massive, altruistic opportunities. It's not going to come without challenges, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, exciting times for us all. And my final question, and we've been talking about leadership today and what it means to be a leadership in this digital world. I'll use the digital word again, but is there a leader that's had a big influence on your career to date? Somebody who's inspired you to get to where you are today?
So, I have a whole set of people. I'd love to credit like the entire Sun Microsystems distinguished engineer group. Right. There wasn't one person in that team, right, who was outstanding. I mean, if I had to pick one, it would probably be, John Deutsch, who came up with the 7, then 8, right, fallacies of distributed systems. Maybe John Holland, who spoke about hidden order. But fundamentally, it was a whole community of people who blatantly collaborated way before collaboration was cool, and created some of the most amazing technology I've ever seen. And that style, right, I've tried to keep with me in terms of making sure that I am collaborative with the people around me so that the teams that I participate in can have an outsized impact.
Excellent. Well, certainly the way you've been talking about teams and leaders and how they're formed, it certainly sounds like it's working. So, Dan, thank you ever so much. It's been a real an honor and a pleasure to chat with you. I found it incredibly interesting, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So a big thank you from us.
Hey, Barry, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and safe driving, everyone, if you're driving while you're listening to this like me.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers.